You are listening to the Fashion Toolbox podcast with Laura Fish, providing you with all the tools to succeed in this dog-eat-dog industry. Get ready to see a side of the industry that you have never seen before, with real-life insights into what fashion is really like. Join me as I take you on a journey throughout my career in the industry, with a host of special guests, learning secrets of the trade to help you to find your dream career and meet your maximum potential. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Fashion Toolbox podcast. Thank you so much for joining me again today. So, you may remember that I mentioned in the introductory episode that no career path in fashion is ever straightforward. And to give you a great example of that, I will share with you my journey and how I got into the industry. I've always had an interest in fashion, and as far back as I can remember, I was sketching and colouring in outfits. And so, as everyone does, my initial dream career was to be the next big fashion designer, and I would devour books on the subject, as I still do. Back in 2002 is when my journey officially began, and I started my education in fashion. This wasn't the straight road that I had hoped for either, and I really had poor career advice. The college encouraged me to start an AVCE in art and design, which is an advanced vocational certificate of education, and promised that in the final year of study I would get the opportunity to specialise in fashion design. So of course, I joined. The course taught a mixture of various art and crafts, from pottery to jewellery making to painting, but the fashion element of it was incredibly sparse, and I was longing to really get my teeth into the design and making element of fashion. As we approached the final year, I asked the tutor to advise me the types of things that I would learn when I specialised in fashion in the final year, and their response was something along the lines of, "You will just make an A-line skirt, basically." Something which I'd already done in my GCSEs at school. I just really didn't want to replicate that again. What was I learning from that? I was so frustrated that I began to look for other options within the college and finally managed to get onto the BTEC National Diploma in Fashion and Clothing, which was a 2-year intensive course and covered all aspects of the fashion process, from fashion history to pattern cutting, fashion illustration, and even CAD for pattern making. Back then, CAD for fashion was brand new and emerging, and not many companies even had it. So to have the opportunity to learn to digitise pattern back then was a wonderful advantage, one that at the time I really took for granted and I just didn't appreciate at all. Back then, I was a designer through and through and spent hours and hours perfecting my illustrations and design skills. I loved pattern cutting, but I found it particularly frustrating and time-consuming. My heart was really set on design. But then, I started a part-time job to help fund my studies at Debenhams, and quickly became fascinated by visual merchandising. I did absolutely everything in my power to get noticed by the visual manager, regularly causing a stir by changing displays and re-merchandising whole departments whilst on my tidying and customer service tasks. I absolutely loved the idea of this silent seller, working in the early hours of the morning, transforming departments and windows to sell the clothing without saying a word. I worked really, really hard. Every day at the beginning and end of my shift, I would obsess over the department figures and planning ways that I could increase the sales. It was like a competition for me, and I rebelled in it. Eventually, my hard work paid off, and the department was recognised after becoming top of the company for around 5 consecutive weeks, even beating Oxford Street in London. And finally, it got me noticed by the visual team, and I was taken on as a visual assistant. I will be doing a feature episode on the role of a visual merchandiser to give you an idea of what the role entails, so please stay tuned for that one. Anyway, I loved the job, so much so that I decided not to continue on to university, and instead I worked my way up the ladder, moving from store to store until I became a visual manager, which is really where I began to fall out of love with the job. It had just become so monotonous, and I spent most of my day replying to emails and delegating to the team, and I just wasn't being creative anymore. The head office were beginning to control our every display, just literally guidelines for everything, and the creativity was completely zapped from the role that I loved. And so, 7 years on from me beginning my role at Debenhams, I made a shock decision and returned to university as a mature student. Now, for any of you that are considering returning to study, don't ever let age get in your way of your dreams. You are never too old to pursue them. And your passion instantly gives you a shared connection with your peers, no matter what your age. I made friends for life, which were 6 years my junior. This is where my career really began. Although the skills I learnt in university were kind of a refresher from what I'd learnt in college, I also learnt brand new skills, such as grading and tailoring, and made connections which ultimately launched me into my fashion career. I chose a course which covered fashion, marketing and production because initially when I returned to uni, I had my heart set on being a fashion buyer. And so I wanted a well-rounded knowledge that would prime me well for the buyer's role. My course did in hindsight cover just about everything in the fashion industry, but many subjects were just brushed over and were not really in enough detail to make me skilled in that area, which I feel as a graduate you should be, or at least it's kind of what's expected of you. So after our second year, we were offered the opportunity to take a placement year out in industry. And at first I was so sceptical about this. It had already been a really big shock to me going from full-time job back into education. And I was so worried about losing another year when I was already classed as a mature student. But I was given some fantastic advice by a past student who advised me that it was the best thing that she ever did. And so I took her advice and I'm so glad that I did it. I managed to secure a paid placement as a merchandising assistant at a dress-up supplier in my local town. And in that role, I learned all about critical paths, which are also known as Gantt charts, margin sheets and costings, which was a great insight for me into the roles of buyers and merchandisers. But the technical manager had her eye on me and snapped me up for a technical assistant role about a month into me starting the placement. I didn't mind. Here I got the opportunity to visit customers, usually the buying team from the customers, to attend garment fittings, updating tech packs, checking labels and packaging, and maintaining test reports. I love the technical side of things, which is something that I just never even considered it before. I was all about design. Another few months of my placement went by, and then one week, the design team was short on staff and were in desperate need of some help with some CAD designs. I offered my help and the team was so impressed with the speed and quality of my designs that I was moved departments for the second time. I have to admit that before starting this role, I had no idea how to operate Adobe Illustrator. We had something like an hour's lesson at uni and we were told just about the short keys, but I was absolutely hopeless with the pen tool and I just couldn't get the hang of it. I felt like chopping my arm off. I was so frustrated with it. But when I landed the placement, I spent every single night teaching myself the basics so that if the opportunity ever did arise, I could design. And it did. The rest is kind of history, as I stayed out the rest of my placement on the design team. Returning to university after that year out was a real challenge, but I was focused and now I had the skills and knowledge learnt from my placement, which really helped with my design work and portfolio. I'd also grown massively in confidence, and I could confidently speak and present in front of the group, which I really struggled with before. About halfway through the year, I received a phone call from the director of the dress-up company that I'd done my placement at, who ran the business in Asia, offering me a job upon completion of my degree in the Far East. I mean, what an opportunity. So just to reiterate the advice I was given, if you have the opportunity to do an industry placement or even just an industry project, grab it with both hands and give it your everything, as it might just lead into your dream career. So life in China was a real eye-opener for me, and I loved every minute. I was taken on as a trainee product development manager, and I was responsible for ensuring the design packs sent from the designers were workable, and then overseeing the sampling process, ensuring the fit and the aesthetics of the garment were correct to what the designer had briefed. I also got the chance to go on regular sourcing trips for new raw materials such as fabrics and trims and visit the factories. So you can see, just up to now already, that my career path has strayed in so many directions, and it was about to again. I love China, but over time I did miss my home comforts, especially my family and friends. And so when the director of the UK office offered me my role back there as a senior designer, I jumped at the chance and returned home. I stayed there for a further 3 years before I began to look for my next move. I was ready for something new, something challenging. I applied for lots of roles and was continuously faced with the same discrimination for the industry that I had come from. One CEO even said to me, "Taking you on board would be like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole." It seemed that no one had confidence in my ability to adapt, but I never lost faith that I could, which is so important. And sure enough, eventually I found a company that took a chance on me, and they did workwear and PPE, which is personal protective equipment. It couldn't have been any further from the garments that I've been designing previously. The role was as a garment design technician and combined the roles of a designer, pattern cutter and garment technician all into one, which was completely new. I took my skills and experience from my previous role and helped the business to set up a functioning department, whilst learning new skills in pattern making by attending training in Gerber Akimark software. Here I learned how to digitally create, check and grade 2D patterns, as well as how to create lay plans and work out markers for garment costings. After a few years there, I was promoted to a product development manager, and although my role didn't change dramatically, my responsibilities heightened, and I began to be more involved in the purchasing of raw materials, understanding everything about fabrics and testing. I absolutely loved this all-encompassing role and the opportunity to use all of the skills that I had accumulated over the years in one role. And so, this is what I'm now pursuing as my career, whilst also studying for my master's degree to support. Now I am increasing my skill set by learning new technologies such as PLM systems, which is product lifecycle management, which I will also be doing an episode on in the future, and 3D pattern making technologies. Although my career path has taken so many twists and turns, the skills that I've learned through those roles have all built the skills, knowledge and abilities that I possess within the industry. This is what shapes you and gives you a helicopter view of a business. Never ever turn down an opportunity to learn something new, even if it's just a new product. Whether you believe it or not, our skills are 100% transferable, and you can put your skills to any product that you like. So whatever career or job you're aiming for, go for it. Thanks for listening to the Fashion Toolbox podcast. Make sure to subscribe so that you never miss out on the future episodes.